Hello everybody, here we are today, and as you can see from the thumbnail or the title of this video, we're getting a little controversial as we're talking about whether or not the NHL should adopt an in-season tournament like the NBA and much of the soccer/football world has. Before we start, please make sure to subscribe if you're new. That being said, let's get into it. So I'm going to give 3 examples of what we could see and then kind of my thoughts at the end of the video. So the first one, again, I'm going to say this right now, I don't have any notes prepared, so this is just all off the top of my head, is you could have every single team in the NHL and you could have a in-season tournament. What you would probably have to do is to get rid of some regular season games or somehow have these regular season games tie into the tournament, have a prize, have a trophy, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to be honest, out of all 3 of these, this seems like the least likely because of how we structure our schedule, but also the amount of games that would have to be probably cut if you did reduce games for a tournament that might not be super popular. And again, 32 teams seems like way too many. I know in a lot of the top soccer things in the world, football, whatever you want to call it, there's 20 teams. Now, I do know that the Carabao Cup or the, I don't know, FA Cup or whatever it's called, I know those are 2 separate things, but I don't know which one it is, has like every English club has a chance or whatever. But yeah, that could be something where maybe all 32 teams are involved, but I don't know, I'm not really liking that option. The second option, I don't really know what you would call this, but this one would be kind of interesting, where you could have a requirement for a certain number of games that they haven't played or a certain amount of minutes that they haven't played, whatever the case is. And you could have guys that are NHL prospects, you could have guys that are, you know, maybe in the AHL that bounce up and down between the NHL, or guys that maybe are in the NHL but they're not getting a lot of minutes. And then you could just basically have every team play their youngsters, and you could really see a good example of how these prospects are doing. I know all the time we talk about, oh, this team is loaded with prospects, blah, blah, blah. It really would be cool to be able to see these guys play, maybe not at an NHL level, but to see them all on an NHL stage and then have a tournament. I know some of these people will be like, oh, they might be in the AHL. Well, a lot of these guys play in foreign leagues as well too. They might play in the ECHL. I really don't know exactly where some of these guys are playing. Some of them might be in the CHL, blah, blah, blah. But just to gather them around and to have some of these guys that might be top prospects or at least good prospects in the system and say, well, this is how they played against guys that are about their age, have this amount of experience, blah, blah, blah. Here's how they did. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And then, of course, teams that end up winning this could, you know, boast about winning this cup, the Youngsters Cup. I don't really know what you would call it, but it would be kind of cool. And then you could also give the young guys some money and just really be a boost for your club in terms of pedigree. And then the third and final thing here that I actually think would be really interesting, but I don't think the league would do it, and I don't think the NHLPA would accept it, would be if they made what I would probably call the Competitors Cup or the Perseverance Cup. And it would basically be a certain amount of teams that finish bottom in the standings, and then basically they would all play in a tournament, and then whoever won that maybe wouldn't get a pick, but they would get a considerable amount of money that would be distributed to players. Obviously, everybody would get paid that played in the tournament, but then the farther you go in the tournament, you would end up having, of course, you know, the biggest amount of prize money. How many teams could you throw in there? Probably not like 10, but you know, maybe just like 8, maybe even 4 of the bottom 4 could play each other. I really don't know. But just to have something for the fans to look up to and say, well, at least we weren't that team that ended up getting blown out by the other 3 teams in the tournament, blah, 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 and at least we won this bit of hardware. Would it be something that you'd be proud about? Would you be, you know, boasting and going on and saying we've won 3 Competitors Cups? Probably not, but at the same time, it gives intrigue for fans that are on the bottom of the ladder. If you want to call it that kind of like a soccer term, they call it a table, never mind. But if you want to just say that teams that are in the bottom of the standings really don't have a reason for fans to watch as much, unless you're a more devoted fan, this would kind of pull in more people possibly, and then also be a good way for fans of the game outside of your market to possibly pay more attention to you and just kind of see what's going on. And then again, with the prize money, the players would like that. And maybe you could even put in picks with this and say, if you win this, you end up getting an additional 3rd round pick. I don't know how exactly that would all go, but just kind of some ideas. Now let's get to my thoughts. Personally, I'm gonna be honest here, and I want to say that I'm not the biggest fan of an in-season tournament. I know that a lot of people will say, oh, you know, it's a big deal because of this or whatever, because they watch soccer, football, whatever you want to call it. I'm not here to get into an argument. But I think a big thing with that is it's more important because a lot of those trophies I feel like are older. The FA Cup is pretty old from my understanding, and some of those, you know, competitions that they go for these in tournaments really used to be played for pride, and it was a badge of honor. And for a lot of these foreign markets and for the sport of soccer, I can't talk, had a tongue twister there. For the sport of soccer, they basically, you know, have multiple pieces of hardware. You can get the treble, stuff like that. And so I think for them, it's a pretty big deal. Whereas for us, we could care less about winning the President's Trophy if our team doesn't win the Stanley Cup. Ask Nashville fans, ask whatever fans. If you win the President's Trophy, you don't really want it as long as, or if you don't win the Stanley Cup. So I guess my kind of thoughts here are that it would be difficult to implement, especially because would you reduce the amount of games? What kind of thing would you have? Certainly all 32 teams would be hard. The sport is very physical, so that would be another issue. Ultimately, out of all these formats, I kind of like the idea of having the younger guys that are prospects possibly play each other and then possibly have the Competitors Cup. I don't think either of these things will work. Again, the NHLPA would probably put their foot down and say, you know, we want to not do this to avoid injuries. But again, with the NBA seemingly to get more and more like soccer every day, maybe we're going to try to implement some things like them in order to try to bring in more revenue and more attention. And I do think that an in-season tournament would possibly bring in more fans from the European market because it seems more familiar. Would I be absolutely opposed to it? No, but I also don't want to see a bunch of regular season games cut. Just add in these in-season tournament games. In my opinion, if we did cut regular season games, we shouldn't have an in-season tournament because I know a lot of people say, oh, the season's too long. We should cut it because of injuries, because of fatigue, all that stuff. Why would you want to replace it with a tournament that really doesn't mean a whole lot to us because obviously it's not historic, but we will see. What are your thoughts on all this? Do you think that the NHL should implement a in-season tournament? And what do you think it should be called? What do you think the basis of it should be? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. No idea if this video will even do well, but it is something that I wanted to talk about. Anyway, everybody, please make sure to stay safe. Have a great night. And you go with hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.